Bend the knee!
Hello, what's going on, everybody? This is Don Willie, and I am back again with probably one of the most important things I will ever do on YouTube. And if you guys, unless you guys have been living under a rock, you know who the two guests I have are, but I will introduce them. They are the co-writers of this wonderful book here, The World of Ice and Fire. They are the site runners and owners of Westeros.org, which, if you are a Song of Ice and Fire fan, you have either been to that site or you know about the site. And if you're not there, I don't know why you're here right now. But yeah, it is Elio Garcia and Linda and Thompson. And I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, man.
Yeah. Hi. It's more or less there, as that's the American pronunciation, I guess. I do that myself when I'm speaking English. Basically, it ends up being different than I would say it in Swedish.
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully, I'm trying to learn a couple of languages myself, and maybe I might add Swedish to my repertoire.
Yeah, that would be more than Elio has done.
That's not fair. No. My Swedish is not very good.
Yeah.
I will admit that.
He understands it, but we talk English all the time at home.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I just had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you guys. I tried to think of stuff that I haven't seen in any other interviews at all, because I've read a lot of them over the past couple of weeks trying to prepare for this. So let's see here. So question number one, and this is actually from a friend of mine, is with all the mysteries in A Song of Ice and Fire, which one do you absolutely want resolved by the end of the series? Like, this is the one that, out of anything, you want this question answered.
Gosh, that's a good question. I mean, normally, the big one is obviously John's parentage, but it's kind of, we feel that it's a done deal, really. So it's not.
Well, the mystery for me is the hows and the whys.
The hows and the whys, yes. The circumstances around it. So the answer itself, we're pretty certain that we know the answer, that it is the common theory, but there's a lot of things around it. There's a lot of bits and pieces that have to fit together before that happens, and what is it? All the bits that lead up to it.
So kind of I guess the circumstances surrounding what happened after the tournament at Harrenhal, maybe some of Rhaegar's motivations, Lyanna's motivation.
Yeah. Why did things end up how they ended up? Because it's that's the big one.
And George said at one point in a very teasing fashion that a lot happened at Harrenhal, indicating that there's a lot we don't know about. And I would kill for, I would die for a story focused on Harrenhal. I don't think we're ever getting it, but more details, please.
Okay. So my next question, because I don't think I've seen anyone ask you guys this one: favorite house or character, and why?
Well, my favorite character, I've been asked that one before. I'll say my favorite character is Catelyn Stark. A lot of people find that very unusual. To me, Catelyn, so many of the other characters are kind of are the best at something. There's something cool about them. Like Tyrion's really smart and witty. Jaime is a great swordsman, or was a great swordsman anyways. Jon has, his dire wolf and his heritage. Everyone's, has something, but Catelyn is just an every woman. She feels like a very real person who isn't the brightest or the most dangerous or the most lovable, but she just feels human and flawed in very human ways. And that I am attracted to that. As for favorite house, I am a bit of a House Dane fanboy.
Not just a bit.
Yeah, House Dane does it for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of a bit more of a traditional fantasy reader in that Daenerys is my favorite character, in that I like the fairy tale aspects of her journey, still contrasted with the very real problems that she has to deal with. But it's more, I guess, about her chapters than perhaps Daenerys as, you know, a character. But I like her as, certainly as a point of view, and the things you get to experience through her quite a bit. I'm also, I guess, a bit of a House Dane fanboy, but probably even more of a...
Fangirl, surely.
Oh, yes, fangirl. Otherwise, it's kind of evenly divided by... is it Martell or Targaryen? I vary.
Depends on your mood.
It depends on my mood. I like dragons, but Dorne is a cool place, and...
Okay. All right. So, I mean, you know what's funny, because like, I'm actually not a Catelyn Stark fan, and like I started watching the show before I read the books, and going back and reading the books actually made me not be a Catelyn fan. I just hated the way that she treated Jon. So it was, yeah.
It's a very complicated situation.
Yeah,
I think,
it's one we've argued about, because I had that reaction too to Caitlyn in Catelyn. See, I mispronounced that even.
Yeah.
But liking Jon, if you like Jon, you are going to be offended on his behalf, and you're going to want to you're going to feel protective about him as a character. So she's going to automatically become a little bit of an enemy there. At the same time, if I sort of sit down and think about it and cut out the emotion from it, the way she reacts is pretty understandable, given that Ned's done something really weird by raising his bastard in his household. And, you know, I certainly wouldn't be very happy if the guy I was married to decided to, in a situation like Westeros, to bring his bastard child in and have it raised in the household where it could potentially threaten the succession of my children. So I can understand her actions, but sort of the gut reaction is still, well, she was really mean to Jon. But obviously people focus on the one, you know, and I do too, where, you know, when she's at Bran's bedside and, you know, wishing it would be you, Jon. But at the same time, you know, she isn't under a huge amount of stress at that point. You say all sorts of hurtful things that you probably wouldn't otherwise say. But again, if you like Jon, you're going to end up on his side, and she's the other in that conflict. And it can be hard to get around those sort of instinctual emotional reactions to a character. I'm a very sort of emotional reader, in that I tend to like and dislike things quite strongly and be fairly sort of biased against characters just on sort of gut feeling. But when you sit down and break it down, you can sort of, well, I suppose she has a point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
But I can understand why people react like that.
Yeah. No, it's certainly. For my
on rereading, I would say that I understood Catelyn's point of view a lot more than on the first read.
Yeah.
So I guess I have another reading to do. Maybe I'll be a little more sympathetic next time. Right, so my next question, you know, seeing as how you guys were not only co-writers but obviously heavy contributors to the world of Ice and Fire, so, you know, the book, I guess, that would follow along with this same arc would be Fire and Blood. And I know there was a lot of material cut from the world of Ice and Fire in order to get into Fire and Blood. So do you expect that to be like a bigger book than the world of Ice and Fire, or possibly a smaller book, or, you know,
if we don't cut anything,
anything,
and if George ends up adding
as much material for the other kings,
it would have to be bigger. But the thing is, I mean, part of it is the sort of the whole economics of publishing, and like what can a publisher reasonably expect to get in return for something. So it's not certain that would be an illustrated volume. I would guess it would be,
but maybe not as heavily.
Maybe not as
You might not
heavily.
think of that as a coffee table book in the same way. With this one, you know, George was always stressing this is going to be a big, beautiful book. This is a coffee table book. You know, I want this to be something people can sit down and leaf through and really enjoy just looking at the pictures or just reading a bit here and there. And so I'm not sure he will see wanting something that is focused on sort of the Targaryen history in the same way. You know, maybe he's going to want to go with illuminations or something and make it a bit more of a Maester's, you know, just wild speculating, but I don't think it will have as many images.
I don't know about that, but I think that realistically it probably won't be as, it might be about the same size, and I think we'll still have to cut stuff, is my guess.
Maybe just more sort of compressing and just streamlining some of it rather than cutting major chunks.
Yeah,
some
but there might be
could...
minor episodes that you have to kind of decide have to go, but we'll see. I mean,
you know, it runs away with George. And so they kept growing. We got that first, you know, sidebar he wrote, Aegon's Conquest.
A few thousand words.
8,000 words. And then they just kept growing from there.
The Dance of the Dragons was like 60,000 words. There's a lot of words, I mean.
Okay, so I would imagine that we're probably not going to need full, you know, like other volumes of books, because I know like a lot of people are would like to see a book on Aegon's Conquest or, you know, certain other things, but it kind of sounds like that he's already written enough to kind of fill in.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. George.
He commented that about the dance in particular, saying that, you know, there's... Was it?
I thought it was actually about Maegor.
Maybe it was about Maegor. It's saying that, you know, there's a good 2-3 novels worth of material here, but I'm not going to write it now that I've gone through and outlined all the details. Because he's already visited all the significant events, and then it feels like just retracing his steps.
Yeah. So,
So my next question is, you know, seeing how you guys came up with the character of Maester Yandel and put a lot of work into writing things from his perspective, was it difficult to put in details that, you know, you had already read and that you knew to be kind of untrue to the actual story, but knew that had to kind of take a spin just based off of the way that the Maesters are filtering information? Like, for example, with Robert's Rebellion, there's the story of Ares actually killing Ilya and the children, as opposed to it being the mountain.
Yeah, that we were very aware and very knowing that we thought. I mean, like, we really tried to think it through. Like, if this guy's writing in the reign of Robert, and obviously then Robert dies and so on. And by those scratching out of the names, you know, he's like, this is starting to become contemporary with novels. How does he react to sort of, like, imagine he wrote Robert's Rebellion and he talked about how Jon Arryn and Eddard Stark were so important to his campaign, how Stannis Baratheon was entrusted to take Dragonstone, and then next thing he knows, Robert is dead, Eddard is a traitor, Stannis is a pretender to the throne. Can he really send Joffrey his book saying, "Hey, how great Eddard Stark and Stannis was"? So yes, my imagination, he had to cut out his original Robert's Rebellion and put in a much trimmed down, because if you read it, like, Eddard is like mentioned like once, maybe not even at all, and Stannis definitely isn't mentioned whatsoever, I think.
And the interesting thing is, I mean, if you look at the sort of the textual history of the book, is that this kind of grew out of us working. The Robert's Rebellion was a problem for us because we kept going, okay, people should know so much about this. It's really recent history. At the same time, we knew that George didn't want to reveal more than what was already in the books, because some of those revelations are going to be significant to the end of the book. So we kind of had to think about how to work around that, and eventually you hit upon the whole thing. Well, he can't write. I mean, I think you already had written a more detailed account.
Yes.
And then basically, well, this is what Yandel would have done. He would have written this detailed account. Then Robert goes and dies, and he can no longer include it because he can't sit there and praise Ned and Stannis.
Or he can't depict Even under Robert's reign, he can't really write about how awful Tywin was for
No.
the sack of King's Landing, because Tywin is the father to the queen, and he's a powerful person, and he doesn't want his head chopped off because he angered the wrong person. So, yeah, it was great fun just kind of thinking about the politics and how that affects a historian who's trying to present a contemporary history when very, very powerful people who are in that history are still around and can have an opinion, possibly a very violent opinion, about what you wrote about them.
Okay. Wow. All right. That is that is a very, very interesting indeed. I'm glad to gain your perspective as to how you approached it. Now, have you been approached to handle any other properties, since the World of Ice and Fire has come out?
Well, I mean, George apparently in an interview mentioned that he would be working with us on Fire and Blood, and he actually didn't directly tell us that. So,
we're not sure where we stand on that. Whether
most of the material that it exists for it was written by him already, and he seems to want to write more. So I'm not quite sure what role we would have.
Continuity, perhaps, and piecing it together.
Or maybe he wants sort of... there's the whole thing where Gildain sort of has to stop writing at a certain point, so maybe he wants Yandel to pick up from there. So we'll see where that goes, but I other than that, I mean, we contribute to the app, the official app. We actually just finished a couple of months ago the update for Night of the Seven Kingdoms with all the Duncan Egg information. I think that's out on the app now. And
no, didn't they say it wasn't?
Well, no, apparently it's the Android version doesn't have it yet. The iOS version apparently does. So there's that, and we managed this thing called Flipboard, this magazine on the internet where you kind of curate your own magazine. We manage it for we manage the official George R. R. Martin Flipboard page where we basically just share links to articles or videos or things that are of interest to fans of George's work.
That's about it. That's about it right now. Official capacity, so to speak, other than just trying to catch up on updating the website.
Yeah.
And speaking of the website, what is the most difficult part of running Westeros?
Gosh.
For the last years, it's been keeping everything stable during the mad, crazy rush of people when the show is on. That's been by far the overriding concern, because even if we manage to, every year we think we've solved to stabilize it, and there's always something that throws it for a loop. Like this year, we decided to upgrade our wiki to offer a mobile version of the wiki as well. Yeah. And that turned out that messed with the caching of the wiki pages, so that all of a sudden it was pulling in a lot more traffic than it should, or than the server to handle. So it's
constant struggle with that,
constant struggle keeping it balanced. And then just sometimes, working at home and keeping yourself on some sort of schedule and actually getting things done, it's very easy to drift off into doing various fun things here and there.
Yeah, I know that feeling all too well. The next one is if you two ever actually get married, or unless you are married in secret.
We got married last year, the same date that the book came out.
Oh, come on, guys, you're killing me here. Oh man, I wish I would have known that earlier. All right, so now the question is, was it a regular wedding or was it a Song of Ice and Fire themed wedding?
It was extremely basic because, we've actually been engaged since '98.
Yeah. And
it's kind of a tradition in my family for some reason that people tend to not get married until they've had a few kids. That's what all my cousins have done, and we kind of didn't manage that part. But after a while, I just realized that, I like to plan things into minute details, and then I get super stressed about it. So I never really got around to feeling like I could possibly plan something that I would be happy with, and then we'll do the date of the book. That's kind of cool way to commemorate it, so we just kept it extremely basic.
Yeah, just basically go to court.
Yes, and say yes.
Get it done really fast.
Yeah, so we didn't risk a Song of Ice and Fire wedding because somebody would have died, I'm sure. Probably if you had tried to plan one, I would have died from stress, basically. So it would have, been a red wedding in some fashion.
Well, either way, congratulations.
Thank you.
And if I'm not mistaken, either your first anniversary has just passed or it's coming up.
It just passed, yeah.
Okay, well, congratulations again on your one-year anniversary as well. Okay, so my last question before we end this interview: has anyone ever insisted that you know the book, how the books are going to end, and that you are just refusing to divulge that information?
Not really, and part because we've been very clear to people that I guess there's people who might cast doubts, but we've said George doesn't tell us the end, and we don't. And someone got upset when I said this once that we have better things to do than when we were talking with George, just talking about the books. Like, we don't really talk about the books that often when we're talking. I mean, when we're seeing him spent a few days with him at this convention in Åland. It's an island off of the coast of Sweden. And, we just talked about pretty much anything not the books. Basically, when we did our panels, it was about the books, but otherwise we talked about movies and other things we had read and so on. So we don't, and he knows, because we're fans, he knows that we don't want to just tell us. We want to read it, right? Yeah. So we don't know the end. We don't know. Have people insisted? I guess I've seen people speculate that if anyone knows the end of a story besides David and Dan, maybe Elio and Linda do. And
I guess when you're arguing things on the forum, sometimes there'll be people, or rather people who are writing various arguments on other forums might say that, well, Elio said this thing, and he probably knows how the book ends and so on. So there are people who've kind of got that assumption, but they haven't really spoken to us about it.
But no, we do not. We don't know the end. We want to read it just like everybody else, and it hasn't been too much of an issue. I mean, I think sometimes there are people who seem to have basically. There have been people who have issues with the fact that we've indicated we've read stuff that hasn't been published. We know some things that haven't been published. More about setting details or history rather than present story. Yeah. And I've sometimes referred to them in discussions, offering this helpful information about, George said this, or there's this thing where he indicates this, and people get upset because you're holding a secret knowledge over us, and it's not. I look at the website. The website was created to share information that's. So when I share that stuff, that's to me at the core of what I want to do. Is I just want to share what I know within the limits of what's reasonable. I can't share stuff that I know George would be unhappy about if we shared it. But there are things from the rule book that we had to cut that I know wouldn't bother George if we shared the details. It's just that we couldn't fit it into the book. So there's that, but that's nothing quite like someone insisting, arguing with you, you definitely know, I can tell. Yes, that's never happened.
Okay, cool. Listen, well, thank you guys very much for agreeing to do this, and hopefully I'll get to talk to you again, in the future.
Yeah. No, it was fun. Absolutely.
For the rest of you out there, make sure, if you haven't already, to pick up The World of Ice and Fire. This is an absolutely great addition to the Song of Ice and Fire experience. And, I'm probably going to do a reread on this one very soon. And listen, you guys already know the deal from me. Rate, comment, subscribe, share, tell your friends, come back for more. Thank you again to Elio and Linda. That's been my time. Down Willie, I'm out.